historical record oh, with previously hidden factual accounts of women and minorities. You got my last sentence there. Okay. Kathy also leads workshops in researching facts, structuring a manuscript, and publishing one's own family stories. She might tell you about that later. Okay. And she has books to sell too. Okay. Today, this morning, she's going to tell us how to find your motivation, how to focus your book topic, how to develop a basic research plan, which is pretty important, and how to locate details that enrich your storytelling, probably the most important of all. So please welcome Kathy Marshall.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, can everyone hear me in the back? Do I need to hold this like this? Okay. Let me do this right here. Okay. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. Let's see if I can do all this correctly. Are you giving the microphone the finger? Chris, you must stop. Oh my gosh. Anyway, you know what? But thank you, Chris, for being here. I do appreciate you very much. But anyway, so, oh no, oh no. Well, please save your questions from the end for the end, and we can answer whatever you might have, given the time period that we have to do it in. So this is going to be a hands-on type of presentation. So hopefully you have a pencil, pen, paper, smartphone, laptop, anything that you might be able to type on, because this will make the experience, I think, more fun, and you can customize it for yourself. You'll be able to actually use some of these ideas. I'm not going to call on you, so don't be scared. These are just going to be for you and your writing and your edification. So I worked for the California Highway Patrol for 36 years as a researcher, analyst, technical writer, and human resources specialist. And I wrote nothing but the facts, ma'am. Dragnet fans will know what that means. But after 40 years of haphazardly collecting family history documents, I finally figured out how to motivate myself to analyze the research in order to write family storybooks. One published book per year became my mandate in 2016. But how could I do that? I grew up in California and all my family was in Ohio and Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia. I didn't know anything at all about them. And it's devilishly difficult for the descendants of enslaved people to find out historical information about our ancestors. But I love a mystery. So doing detective work to find answers is actually kind of fun for me. Let's see. Am I hitting the wrong button? Let's try this. Let me try it this way. Bing. Thank you. Sharing my research toolkit. So even if you're not interested in genealogy, it's okay. These measures that I'm going to talk about could work for probably any genre of writing. So I'm hoping that whatever I say, just try to think of it in terms of what you like to write. So today we're going to talk about setting writing goals, finding factual material that lends credibility to your writing, and, as Cheryl said, locating details that make books rich in storytelling and fact. And also, you may not have done this or thought about doing this, but taking a research trip to enhance your setting and characters can help, because you then get to feel all the emotions and the see, the smell, all of those wonderful factory, olfactory and whatever that we say writers should be imparting to the reader. And then we're going to find and practice ways to turn dry facts into engaging tales. And that's really the most fun part, I think. Okay, so I just want to find out a little more about you. Now, I know in the very beginning, some of this came out. Oh, wow, that's interesting. What happened? So, how many of you have already published a book? Okay, cool. How many are in the process of writing a book? Oh, maybe it's, let me move this out of the way. Maybe my phone is interfering. Oh, okay, Zoom people. Well, they all look muted though. Okay, so how many of you like to enter short stories or books into awards competitions? Whoa, brave souls. How many of you write for your bread and butter? This is what you do. Kudos to you. How many of you want to sell your books? And how many of you just want to hand a book to your family and friends? You just got this burning story in your heart. No hands on that one. All righty. How many of you want to be on the New York Times bestseller list? Yay. Well, having a goal is important to achieving your goal of success or achieving your view of success. See. My personal goal is publishing at least one book per year, as I said earlier. So think about what your goals are to help you stay on track. So instead of me droning on and on and on right now, imagine how what I'm presenting could enhance your writing journey. Take just a moment to write your writing goals. Just write down what your personal goals are. Again, mine is to write one book a year, self-publish one book a year for my family. With all those questions I asked you, what are your goals to do with your writing? Okay. When I'm starting a new writing project, I like to think about the end result first. What the heck does that mean? Nobody does that. Not everyone is interested in publishing paperback books to be sold on Amazon. It's just too daunting for a lot of people, right? So, do you have a burning desire to create a podcast? Where's the podcast guy? There you go. A blog? Anyone do blogs in here? Photo books. Does anyone ever write a photo book? I do, believe it or not. I've written about 30 of them on different topics, including genealogy trips. What about documentaries? Hardback books. There you go, Chris's documentary. So what about a newsletter? Facebook page? Or social media pages to put your writing on that? Or screenplay. How many screenplay writers? Wow. Okay. So anyway, just write down your desired end result for your current writing project. Like, okay, so we're all here to learn about research. I imagine, and some of you said that you're in the middle of writing some kind of book. What is your end product going to look like? Is it going to be a paperback, hardback, podcast, blog, film? And what genre will you write? Science fiction, nonfiction, romance, mystery, poetry? Well, I want to be considered a competent genealogist, meaning a nonfiction writer. I want the books to be interesting. And I mean books that can be read by young people, my grandchildren, 80, 90, 100-year-old people. I gather as many facts as I can, and then I dabble a bit with plot development and try to bring out my family's characteristics. I usually write the story from my ancestors' points of view so that we can learn from them what their lives were like. That's my intention. And it's a lot more fun that way as a writer, I think. So I usually write from the ancestor's point of view. So no, I wasn't personally in Talbot County, Georgia in 1856 to hear exactly what the Marshall slave owner told my ancestors to do, but I want the reader to feel and see and hear what my ancestors may have experienced. And I imagine we all want to do that. We want the reader to feel what we're writing, to feel the story, to be right in the story. So there are many ways of communicating your words, and I want to encourage you to find what floats your boat. Do you want to speak from your heart in the first person, I did this? Or you did this for second person? Or the third person, she did this? An omniscient narrator point of view. Why bother even thinking about point of view and end products at the beginning of your research? Most people don't do that. They just start writing, right? Well, because it helps to organize your writing approach when you think about these milestones early on in the process. Let's see, can I move it? Wow. Gathering research facts. Why should I research anything? I've got a story in my head ready to spill out onto the paper. I don't need to research. I already know what the story is. How many say that or think that sometimes? How many of you like to read detective stories? Okay. Or science fiction? So, how would you feel if the author obviously didn't know the first thing about police procedure? Or they confused our solar system with a nebula? My science fiction boyfriend gave me that one, so I don't know what that means. Would you keep reading the book or would you chuck it, saying, this author doesn't know what they're talking about, I'm wasting my money? It's not believable. Google search is our best friend to help us make things believable and authentic. For example, in your computer browser, type handcuffing techniques in 1880 Victorian England, unquote, if that's what you're writing about. Now, how many of you use Google for this all the time anyway, to look up things? It's just a wonderful tool for anything. Use quotes to indicate which words must absolutely be in the search results. A wealth of potential responses should appear on the screen to help you determine how to approach the topic in your story. I'm not talking about plagiarism, taking everything verbatim and putting it in your work that you're going to sell. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just fact finding to help give you more informed ideas on how to write what you want to write. How many use Google Books? So there's such a thing as Google Books, and they're free. They're online. They're usually for older stories. What is it? It has to be 70 years old or older, the book or the story, something like that. But you might find the perfect information there, especially if you're writing in previous centuries. Read other books, periodicals, newspapers, magazines, dealing with the same subject matter that you're doing. And I'm going to share with you some examples in a few moments of what I mean. This is a source that you may not have heard about, chroniclingamerica.loc, which is Library of Congress, .gov for government. They've got fantastic maps and images that are for free. So it's public. You can use those images in your documents. They're copyright free, if that's the word. And that's really, really important because you don't want someone to read your book and then come back and sue you saying, hey, that's my stuff. So do your own primary research, like interviewing cops and doctors. How many of you have actually done that? Interviewed actual people in the occupations that you're writing about? They don't give you any guff, do they? Sometimes they're really happy. They're happy to help. You're writing a book and I can help you write it. So if you're writing about some kind of technical item that you're not comfortable with, try to interview someone who actually does that and put them in the acknowledgments, a thank you in the acknowledgments. Okay, you can also travel to the location where your story takes place. Ah, look at that, first time. Primary research, obtain firsthand, and secondary research is about using existing data. So here's an example of firsthand primary and secondary research. Secondary research is what most of us do. We get online, we compile, we rearrange existing data from books, etc. We get ideas, like the summary on the picture in the above right. It says activation in education. Reba Williams, as the saying goes, it's never too late to learn something new. And for Reba Williams, the saying is all too true. In March 2013, at the ripe age of 106 and wearing her white graduation cap, Williams earned her diploma from Ohio's Mount Vernon High School and proved that there is not an expiration date when it comes to achieving one's goals. So that's already been written. It's secondary. I can believe it's true, or I can assume that, well, maybe it isn't true. Maybe I need to find more information. Primary research would be the other. So It's when I personally interviewed my great aunt Reba in 1983 and 2014 when she died, right before she died at 2014 at the age of 107. So her chapter in my first book, The Ancestors Are Smiling, which is, it's one of those green books up there, is the most well-documented story I've ever written. So in addition to my interviews of her, there are numerous video and newspaper interviews about her 100th birthday and when she became a superstar at 106. I found interviews as far away as England because of the Associated Press. You know, these things are picked up. And anyway, and there are photographs of her life. So I was able to actually write a very authentic chapter about her in my book. And this is an example of a little something, a snippet from her book, from my book, her chapter in my book. I don't know why everybody's making such a big deal about me getting my high school diploma at 106 years of age. Jay Leno told my story one night on his Tonight Show after the Associated Press had broadcasted my story all over the news wires in America and even in England. And can you believe that Essence magazine put a picture of me, Reba Williams, in their December 2013 edition? See, I'm sitting up in my bed in my white cap and gown. It was all too much hullabaloo, just the same old to me. That's the advantage of being able, when you interview, you get your own primary research. You will get amazing, interesting little tidbits like her sayings, how she spoke to help you write your story. And again, any story, whatever character, if it's, fiction, doesn't matter. It may be a character that you might want to base off of Reba Williams, as an example. This is mainly geared towards nonfiction writers, but it may be applicable to fiction writers. I don't know. Cite your research sources. You can log it down. Well, you can use footnotes. You can use endnotes. So a footnote is a reference at the bottom of the page. I'm sure you all know that. An endnote is where you take all of those references for the end of the book. Now, I usually do it that way because I don't want to be interrupted. Okay, so it just depends on what you're writing. If you're writing nonfiction, they can be interrupted, but you can use footnotes with no problem. But if it's a story, nobody's going to want to really have that as an hindrance to following along and staying in the moment. But what I do at the beginning, when I'm writing the book and I'm finding these resources, I copy the URL. So if I got something from the internet, I just select it all, I copy it, and then I paste it in my actual manuscript as an endnote so that I can easily go back to it later and pull that out. And if I choose to use that particular source, I can build it out as I'm supposed to, according to the Chicago Book of Style or whatever APA, whichever version you're using, as to how it's supposed to be. Here are examples in red as to how you can actually format your reference. How many of you use references, use footnotes or endnotes at all? So just a couple. Again, it's generally for nonfiction book. Okay, and fiction writers, you get to snub the citations? Lucky you. Yes. Yeah, if you don't mind, only because I don't know how much time we have at the end, but please feel free, just jot it down. But okay, now we're getting into the meat of this presentation, I think. A lot of us who do capture references, resources, we don't know what to do with them. We have some of them stored in this folder over here, and some of them are written in our notebook over here, and some of them are in the laptop, and some of them are all over the place. It's really hard to consolidate and get ideas of the whole picture when your data, your information, your characters are all over the place. And so that's what we're going to try to deal with right now. So I use spreadsheets to consolidate the data I collect for each character or family member that I'm studying. This chart includes information from a census, marriage records, and death certificates. You may or may not use that information in your work. You can also use this format if you're making up dates and places for your fiction story. It's just a place to put all of the information in one place. So the first step in this process is to turn the facts into English sentences. Again, think Dragnet. Nothing but the facts, ma'am. Here's a sample factual paragraph about my protagonist, great-great-grandfather Otho Williams, in my Finding Otho, The Search for Our Enslaved Williams Ancestors book. So see the top shaded line? It says Otho, 1834, Frederick, Maryland, 1889, Boonesboro, Alice Logan Farmer. Nothing but facts. I can actually change that and make that into an English sentence. Like, Otho was born in 1834 in Frederick, Maryland. He married Alice. Otho was a farmer at some point in his life. He died in Boonesboro, Maryland in 1889. Is it boring? Yes, but it's the first step. And here's what you can do with even the first step. So for me personally, the way I do all my books is I start off initially with a blank word processing document. The first page is the title. The second page I build in, it's for the copyright. The third page is a dedication. The fourth page is a poem or whatever. Fifth page is the table of contents. And then I get into the chapters. So if I know I'm writing a chapter about Otho's early life, I can take that boring sentence of facts and just paste it right into the chapter right off the bat. And so that's how I can use it. I can then build and massage that later. But this is how I do all of my work initially, so that I'm doing something with the facts that I'm getting. So I don't know how clear that is, but hopefully it will work. The next step is to enhance the facts with description, setting, and dialogue. So later on, and not too much later, I'm going to give you 3 writing prompts to help practice these techniques. And why I did this is because honestly, a lot of times when we read a document like a census, it has a ton of information on it. Many of us, at least genealogists, only read the first 3 columns. We don't read the occupation. We don't read all this other stuff that truly does flesh out the character. How much money did they make in 1870? Well, that gives you an idea of how wealthy or not they were. So anyway, it's just a way that you might want to try for your work. Locate details that enrich your story. Review your research questions and plot twists. So that who, what, when, where, why. Do we care about that? Do we care about those words for your characters? Does it matter who they are and when they were born? And sure, of course. Does it help with your plot twists as to who they are and what their little proclivities are? Sure. So review your research questions and plot twists and examine documents for facts that will answer those who, why, when, where, how, and what questions that we should cover. For an example, dates. Research the time period your story takes place in and include that information in a timeline. These are suggestions for how you can deal with data. When you're collecting research data, where do you put it? As I said a couple minutes ago, is it in a box? Is it in a folder? Is it in your computer? Let's find one place to put all of that data. A timeline, I use a spreadsheet, but you can use whatever you want. A timeline of all of those facts is really, really helpful, because then you can kind of see whatever your story is, and then you can modify it as you wish. You can move those around, but it's a place, a way to put all this information. So with regard to the places where your story takes place, you research the time and place where the action occurred. Excuse me. The current book I'm working on takes place in Virginia and Ohio. So I need to learn a lot more about those locations because I don't know anything about Virginia. And I know little about Ohio because I was raised in California. Names. Determine how your characters are connected to each other. I'm doing family relationships, but you've got to figure out with all of your characters, how are they related? And of course, how much do you share with the reader early on? And how much do you save on that? Initially, I'm just still collecting data, the facts. Occupations. How many of you do research on the occupations of your characters? And you find out, what is it that they do? What is the setting? What types of materials, tools do they, what kind of uniforms, if they have uniforms, do they wear? So for nurses in the 1950s, you might want to find out what their lives were like. Teachers, what time period are you looking at? Yeah, because Marcia, she knows all about that as far as the medical stuff, the hospitals and what they do and don't do and the procedures and all that. It's helpful to seem more authentic, that's all. And where you can put that information, I put all of that in the timeline. I have a column for the timeline, for the place, for the time, for occupations. I have my URL pasted right in there. So I can go right back to wherever I found that perfect piece of information. I know, Charles, we were talking about earlier, where is it in my computer once I do this thing? That's why I copy the URL and I paste it into my manuscript so that I know exactly where I found that piece of information, and I leave it there, getting into the part where you're really writing it, you're massaging the sentences and all that. But I make sure I have that information kept in the, either bibliography or the endnotes. And then incidents, various incidents that you're going to write about. So let's say resources for like looking up fingerprinting techniques and other steps for jailing, as an example, and court records for similar crimes to yours. Actual court records is super helpful. If you see, oh, wow, I never thought about someone who would do that, and you can put that in your book. Let's see, look at the reasons for death found in death certificates for your plot, as an example. Medical assessments, cemetery records, etc. And then, of course, research the period clothing. What did they wear back in the 1700s, if that's what you're writing about? What types of foods did they eat in the 1930s during the Depression? Various types of hobbies. What are information about that? Furnishings, the setting, etc. You get it. And it just depends on what you do. Again, I'm hoping you're just listening to what I'm saying and thinking of how that impacts your story, your characters, your plot. Okay, here's an example. A research trip can enhance your setting and characters. It's easier to write about the sight, sound, smells, and touch if you actually experience those sensations yourself. Now, if you're writing about outer space, well, use your imagination. Don't forget to take lots of pictures and video and write a daily diary of your impressions and emotions during your research trip. Why? Because when you get home, you'll have it. It's really easy to forget all the fine details that can really help you make your work explode in a good way. Research local records at a courthouse and public libraries that are unavailable online. Most things are available online now with regard to basic court types of documents, but there are some things that are still only found in the location where the story is being told. This is not just for genealogy. These thoughts can give you ideas for your plot too. Create an itinerary like the one shown to get the most out of your trip. So don't spend thousands of dollars on airfare, car rental, your hotel, only to arrive at the courthouse and say, oh, I wonder what I should look for. That's a waste of $2,000. And believe me, mine are usually $2,000 or a little bit more for a 10-day trip. Yeah. So figure all that out before you leave your house to make your trip worth the money. And believe me, the trips are worth the money. It's indispensable to have that information from my point of view and maybe from yours. Okay. Traveling through Georgia in 2021 with a white cousin. I needed a moment to decide whether or not to share this in a book or not. So here's an excerpt from my Finding Marshall's Family Heritage book to give you an idea of what I experienced in Georgia in 2021 while traveling with a white cousin. I needed a moment to assess the lavish foyer with its navy blue and taupe patterned rug under a hefty 4-foot square table. A handsome flower arrangement of coleus, ferns, and ivy topped that table. 4 columns separated the foyer from the staircase and first floor hallway. Despite its age, the venerable old house didn't smell musty, but the walls whisper their secrets. That's the hallway where Master fondled Sally's behind. Young Master spit on yellow Bob from the top of those stairs. Mistress slapped Susie for taking too long bringing her sweet tea. Every day it was humiliation after humiliation. And I'm just being honest here. This is what I feel when I'm inside these buildings where my formerly enslaved family likely lived. Well, did live. So traveling to the deep south where my paternal Marshall family was enslaved was so visceral. Imagining my ancestors working in the hot sun, retreating at night to subpar shacks, forced to eat the worst parts of animals, regularly being sexually violated by the white master to produce mulattoes who look like me. And the freeing conversations my white cousin and I had in the car in our shared hotel room. In the car talk chapter, we revealed our feelings about our common slave owning Marshall family, current race relations, and religion. All the things you're not supposed to talk about. And we did, and we enjoyed it. Most Americans feel it's taboo for blacks and whites to exchange those types of ideas, but cousin Amy and I felt it was pure magic. I had not originally planned to write a paper about this trip. I usually just write a photo book of my adventures when I go on these genealogy trips. But the trip was so emotional, so revealing, and so ultimately positive that I couldn't resist sharing the results of our collaboration in a real book. This is the epitome of how beneficial a research trip can be in helping to bring the story alive. Okay, how I bring facts to life. First, full disclosure. I find very few documents about my enslaved ancestors that prove my lineage, at least not to the satisfaction of the Daughters of the American Revolution, which is my goal. My goal is to get my work into the Daughters of the American Revolution library. And in order to do that, you must have your P's and Q's. You got to have your T's dotted, your I's dotted, and your T's crossed. And so I have not yet been able to achieve that level of proof, but I'm still working on it, and I will be able to do it. I'm gonna be like Chris in this. I will be able to do it. So if there is, let's say, 3,000 pieces to a normal person's life puzzle, I can usually find about 30. So what I have to do is a heck of a lot of research. I research other books that are out there about the place and time period my family lived. I research slave narratives of people who actually had been enslaved in the areas where my family lived, just to make a possible, so I can write the story, the fiction. So that part is a little creative. It's fictionalized, perhaps, because that's the best I can do at this point. And then I come back in a year or so and maybe can write a second edition book. But this gives me an idea for stories and how that can work. So enslaved people in America were thought of as plow or a plow, and they are rarely mentioned by their names in the usual genealogical documents that are required by Daughters of the American Revolution, as an example. So I'm forced to read other sources to find information that may apply to my family. So how do I bring those facts to life? I totally immerse myself so much that I dream about my ancestors, and I awake with what I imagine their words would be. So don't you sometimes feel your protagonist is talking to you and saying, no, write it this way. I didn't do that. I said it this way. Please, somebody, thank you for shaking your head. Somebody else, shake your head. Yeah, that happens. Yeah, sure. Right. Whatever you say. I mostly write my books from my protagonist ancestors' point of view. Sometimes I'll use a storyteller to write about the slavery era stories prior to 1865. And yes, I depart from pure nonfiction by using dialogue to engage the reader with my characters. Most of you who are fiction writers don't have to worry about that because your characters talk to you all the time, right? No? Yeah. After a bottle of wine, maybe? Okay. Okay, newspapers bring grandma to life. The Cleveland Call Post newspaper recorded 70 news articles about my grandmother Daisy. I learned where she was, why she was there, what she wore, what she was doing, who she was with, what causes she valued, what she ate and exactly said. Grandma reportedly said, In September 1947, I was photographed by the esteemed Alan E. Cole at his studio at 9904 Cedar Avenue. He was the most famous and prolific photographer in Cleveland, with 22 years of experience in photographing prominent people. I was honored that he promoted my credentials on one of his newspaper advertisements. Mrs. Daisy Marshall, a licensed embalmer and undertaker. That's precisely how we colored folk helped each other grow our businesses in the city, raising up our Negro community as a whole. So Chronicling America has lots of free newspaper information from the past. I found an incredible piece of information for my Mystery of Margaret Booker book in that I never would have guessed.
Did you know that your grandmother had all of those articles before you started writing, or did you just find it out?
I knew that Grandmother Daisy was a force to be reckoned with. I met her 5 times in my life. I knew who she was. She's a take no prisoners kind of lady. I knew she was powerful. I was not surprised, but I was delighted. I did not know, to answer your question, but I was delighted because I'm not into clothes and stuff. I'm just not into that. So I didn't ever care about what was called the Jet magazine for Black folks, and it was the social pages. I never cared about that. I care about it when it's talking about my grandma. 70 articles is a whole lot. It was fantastic. So anyway, and here's another example. Oops. I guess I haven't been forwarding this, huh? Sorry about that. There's Grandma. Sorry about that. And the next one. So this is another one of those amazing finds. This was a Google search. I would never have guessed that my paternal great-great-grandfather, Reverend Israel Smith, was interviewed by a congressional committee in 1870. Believe it or not, 123 years ago, the Ku Klux Klan and other white nationalist groups exerted extreme violence to prohibit newly freed blacks from voting in the 1870 election in Alabama. Imagine that. Gosh, the inquiry resulted in a voter recount. Imagine that. And changed the outcome toward the more liberal candidate. Reverend Smith's narrative named the people involved, dates, places, outcomes, etc., which allowed me to write a spirited chapter in the Marshall Legacy in Black and White book. So here's an excerpt. I imagine Reverend Smith could have told his descendants one hauntingly early morning in 1928 in Columbus, Georgia. All these facts are in the congressional record, but I've massaged them a bit. Congressional record investigation told all. The main trouble happened one Saturday night in early June, a few months before the 1870 election. At first, the Saturday night meeting of the Central Club of Macon County was proceeding normally until one man started yelling and threatening other attendees. He wanted Negroes to vote Republican, the Liberal Party of Lincoln at that time. However, some were planning to vote for the conservative Democrats, who promised members liquor or money in return for their vote. The conversation turned into a riot, guns waving in the air, people cursing, and loud threats of bodily violence were filling the sanctuary to bursting. Just picture that lovely church. Bibles and songbooks sat in shelves behind carefully polished wooden pews. Normally penitent people warming the benches. But the devil had entered those same God-fearing folk, encouraging them to blaspheme inside the house of the Lord. That's not supposed to happen. I, your pawpaw, had to stop the desecration, and I mean now. So this is in the book. Reverend Israel Smith is talking, explaining to them what happened so long ago in Alabama. I could write Israel's story using facts, plus my description and dialogue. So cool to have this resource. And on one of my genealogy trips, I went to that church, and there is a placard out there. But guess what? The placard is set in 1970. And I said, no, these things happen. No, it's because the same thing happened in 1970 that happened in 1870 in the same location. research for historical family stories and or whatever you're writing about. Okay. Research for my family historical stories includes primary and secondary research. Reading books from other sources helps me imagine possible ways to frame my manuscript. So that's what I did early on when I finally got with it in 2016, saying you got to start doing something with all this data you've collected since 1976. So for those of you who feel, gosh, I've been working for a long time, you beat 40 years of and not doing anything with it. So I'm the queen. So that's when I started to do it. So I bought books from other authors who did what I wanted to do. How often do you hear that? Model yourself after someone who is successful doing what you want to do. So that really helped me a lot. Other sources helped me imagine possible ways to frame my manuscript. As I said, Mary Genevieve Ward was a local school teacher who lived where my great-great-great-grand Booker was enslaved from 1834 to 1863. In the 1930s, Ward interviewed people who had lived in Beverly during or after the Civil War, and she wrote about their memories of the war. I hope to find stories that included my ancestors or other Black folk to learn what their lives were like during the Civil War. So here's part of Ward's story from my Margaret's point of view. So again, I write my books from the point of view of the character you see on the front of the book. My friend Keziah told me a funny story one day. When her master, Mr. Crawford, heard the Yankees was planning to invade our town of Beverly, he hitched Grizz, his old gray horse, to their biggest wagon. After seating his family in the front end of the wagon, he placed all their clothes, food, and my friend Keziah in the rear. Everything went along nicely until 10 miles down the road. In Huttonsville, he was told, "You guys got to go quickly. The Yankees is right on your heels, riding as fast as they can." Hearing that, old Mr. Crawford began a running that horse at such a high rate of speed that by the time they reached the town of Mingo, 20 miles south, every stitch of clothing and every bite of food had bounced out of the wagon. Nothing remained except for Keziah, who was lying flat on the wagon bed, holding on to its sides for dear life. And that's from the Civil War legends of Rich Mountain, Beverly, Randolph County, West Virginia. So even though this wasn't about my family, I knew there weren't very many Black folks in that area. And so, they probably knew her. Okay, maybe they would have benefited. There was a lot of the the white population left that particular town because it was a Union stronghold, and so they left. So that may have been a story that a lot of folks experienced. Mr. Crawford ran a general store, so this allowed me to write my story more authentically 160 years later. Again, beware of copyright infringement. Okay, this was a great story, but I changed it and I wrote it from the point of view of somebody else, and I modified. And I then also gave her lots of props in the book and in the back, in the bibliography and all that. Oh, that's for him. Okay, so now I'm going to say and know that you're tired of hearing me talk, so we're going to have some fun now. We're going to have some big time fun. Yes. Work. But again, I'm not going to call on you, but I will over time, maybe with the second prompt, ask if anyone wants to read theirs. But for this first one, we'll just do it. It's pretty raw. Anyway, if you have pencil, paper, a smartphone, you can open up an email, or your laptop, open up an email or note app, something that you can write on, anything you can write on. This is how I start my creative writing process. So I've got all these facts, right? And I've got the facts in a timeline, I've got the facts in a spreadsheet. And you don't have to do this. I mean, you guys are all adults, but but if you want to, it might be fun. And it might help you. You might see a different way of massaging it for what you do and how you do it. So we're going to take dry facts and turn them into in English sentences. Step one is to write a sentence or two that contains all of the listed facts for one of the people you choose from this character data and traits chart, which identifies the last and first name, the age, the skin color, eyes and hair color, height, occupation, and miscellaneous traits. So for example, the yellow highlighted one, At the bottom, I might say 6'6" tall Zane Grey was a 60-year-old dentist by day. His bland alabaster skin and gray hair and eyes belied his true passion, writing about rugged horsemen living in the Old West. So just for giggles, take 2 or 3 minutes to choose one of these characters. Imagine that it might be a character you would want to write about, and just take every single fact in the chart and write a couple of sentences or whatever, um, just so that you've included all of those in a paragraph. So choose a person and take 2 or 3 minutes. We're going to build on this, so it's helpful if you want to do the other two to start on this one, but again, you don't have to. Did that make sense, by the way? Did the assignment make sense? Let's choose one.
The gender we get from the name, first name.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Last name, first name, age, skin color. Oh, whatever you want, though. I mean, everything goes, which is nice. Pardon me? Whatever you want. You write it however you want. And believe me, I wrote something so crazy that I'm not even going to be able to tell you on the last prompt. So you can do whatever you want. Why this is important? Well, I've got to be quiet. I got to be quiet while you write. And folks on Zoom, I see you. Thank you so much for coming. I can't see your stuff in the chat though yet. Again, with this one, we're just doing the facts. We're not putting description. We're not getting fancy. We're just putting the facts into a sentence or two. Okay, well, let's move on to prompt number 2. Okay, was it easy to turn the dry facts into a sentence or two? A little bit? Oh, thank you. Let's see. Well, anyway, so what we're going to do now is add descriptive flavor. We're going to rewrite that dry factoid paragraph from number 1, adding at least 3 of the 5 senses: sight, hearing, smell, touch, taste. At least 3. So we're going to give it some sensory flavor. Ideally, you would choose the same one that you did in prompt 1 and just build on it. Okay. All right. I'm going to read this one because I know I can't read my third one. Here's my example. Dr. Zane Gray was a 60-year-old dentist by day, his ears buzzing from the constant whir of his cold dental instruments, the smell of tooth decay, a palate for his artistry. His delicate alabaster skin looked parched, but his sultry grin belied his true passions, writing another tasty episode about Dennis Q, the rugged horse wrangler galloping through a rocky range in the Old West. Does anyone want to read their passage? Just for giggles. Please. Because we all want to hear you.
Sally Smith lifted her glass of Chardonnay and smeared her freshly applied lipstick to the edge. Her pale blue eyes were flitting everywhere in the room, looking for someone worth talking to. She was a well-dressed woman and just knew everyone was staring at her beautifully coiffed hair and diamond earrings.
Excellent. Oh, isn't that fun? Totally different. Anyone else want to read yours? No. Nobody else? Sure. Oh, okay. I'll get you Kim next.
Guy looked at Angela with his mouth agape. She was his vision of an angel. Brown eyes shone from a face of light brown skin, surrounded by a curly, coarse mane of brown hair. He sank in the lilac scent of the soap she used to wash her soft skin. He was entranced.
Super different. Now, Kim? Oh, did you want? Oh, okay. Oh, excuse me. These are so much fun. They're so different, and it's cool. Anyway,
Mine is William Prince. Is it Prince Williams? My my thumb is cut off at the middle joint. Every time I start a new school year, I stand up in front of the class. Oh, I'm sorry. My thumb is cut off at the middle joint. This catches the attention of my squirming 6-year-old students, so they glue their butts to the floor and look up at my hands stretched out in front of me. They are they oops, sorry. My hands are in constant motion as I talk. Once a little boy, James Johnson, fixed his eyes on my hand and yelled out, "Where's your thumb?" I left it in the belly of a wolf.
ooh, wow, that's cool. Let's see. I think did you?
So I took a civil rights tour once, and everything you say about Alabama and the relationships that still occur, they do still occur down there. Shocking to many Californians, including African American students who were part of the tour. They don't know the history that still exists down there. So anyway, with that, Miss Sally could smell what her husband had been up to in the freezing quarters in the back. "Huh," she snorted, pushing back her hair. "You married me for the sound of cash crinkling in my hand, but this is the last time you'll touch this lace of mine. Prince, get your luscious black ass in here."
Woo! Girl.
It's early in the day.
Okay.
Prince William had the smooth, dark skin of a young man despite his 46 years. He smiled slightly whenever he talked, a sign of his gentle nature, yet his brown eyes looked straight into the person he spoke to.
Good. Very good. Okay. Okay. Oh, sorry. You were the one that's. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Sundays after church were reserved for family dinner when Angela, her two sisters, and cousin Mildred would cook up the finest gumbo of fresh crawfish and andouille sausage and red beans, accompanied by collard greens cooked in fatback with a side of cornbread. The smell of this sumptuous meal hit you as soon as you hit the front door of my Aunt Angela's home.
Okay. Well, you know, this was fantastic and fun. So much better than that first one, right? But the first one has its uses. Number one, it's a way to get all of those facts into your manuscript. Again, I don't know if you do it, but this is the way I do it. I actually immediately put it right into the chapter that it belongs in, that factoid right in the chapter, and then the URL. But this now has so much more life. Do you think we can go to another level? Let's try another level. Prompt number 3, we're going to add dialogue. So I often take that factoid paragraph, and then after a little flavor has been attached, and I pretend I'm the protagonist talking with another character. I want dialogue in there. So that's what I have to do with mine, since I can find so few facts about my actual family. I have to spread it out with the senses and with dialogue. So that's what we're going to do to what you just did in number 2. And again, you can revise it however you want for this, but just to kind of build on those initial facts. And I'm going to put the slide back so you can see the facts again. So again, take another 3 minutes or so and add dialogue to it. Let's see if I can go back so you can choose the one you were working on. However you want to do it. There are no constraints. Okay, well, I just looked at the time and I noticed that, we're almost at the end of our time. So what I'm going to do is, you already know what that is, prompt 3 and dialogue, but we won't be able to share at least at this time. But anyway, and this is it. This is the recap. So just get started now and set your goals. I'm just gonna, I can turn this page. Set goals for your writing. It's just helpful in the long run to keep it more organized initially. Do primary and secondary research to enhance your creative storylines. And locate the details that make books rich in storytelling and fact. The research trip is really fun too, in addition to helping you write your story. And then turn dry facts into engaging tales using excerpts from these books as an example that you see and over there, but speak their names, write your stories. I know that you can do it. Again, I'm going to be a Chris Hennessy in a second here, and I'm going to say you can do it now. A lot of us are of a certain age where we need to do it now. You know, it's not about the journey anymore, it's about the destination. Yes, it's the destination. Whatever your end result is the destination. So if you know anyone that might want to chat with me about what I have to offer, you've already seen, seen this, feel free to either contact me or have them contact me at kathylynmarshall.com. Anyone who's ready to turn family lore and facts from research documents into a written legacy book, send them my way. I've only brought 6 of the books here today, but you're welcome to look through them, and they are for sale if you're interested. Today, they're for $15 only, no matter what Amazon might say more. Just $15 today, special price, and more information is there. So, come on. It does not want to go to the next page. Okay, yep, that's it. Okay, thank you. And if you have any questions in the next 5 minutes, feel free. I know there were some questions. And from the chat, let me look in the chat also. Okay, please mute your online thing. Okay, great. Anyone? I'm sorry.
I write, historical nonfiction, and so I was researching the life of a gentleman who actually died in New Orleans in 1849. He was not a citizen there. He'd come in on a ship, and he died on the ship. I knew that part. Okay, I needed to find out where he was buried, if he was buried there. Okay. As a stranger. So I found out that at least in New Orleans, there are people who will do research for you. You don't have to go there, okay? You can hire them, tell them exactly what you want to find, what you want them to look for, and you negotiate a fee with them and perhaps pay for their gas and their, if they have to, parking, at the library and whatnot. So for just one thing, that's all I wanted to know, just that one thing. And it worked out really well. So I didn't have to spend $2,000 going to New Orleans and, for one thing.
No, I just wondered, my writing style is kind of weird. I mean, I don't sit down in front of the laptop every day, but as I'm writing and have sort of an idea, I'm sort of writing as if the tracks are being laid as the train is going down the line. So, but I will go do research because it's like, okay, how am I building this character, and where did he or she come from, the training that they got, and that's, to me, in both short story writing and poetry, really half the fun. All the research.
Anybody else have a question or comment? Okay, anybody online have a question or comment? You can unmute yourselves online on Zoom. Feel free to unmute if you want to ask a question. And if not, then I guess we are done. Thank you so much. Hope you got something out of this. And again, see me over here if you're interested in looking through any of these books or giving them as gifts, whatever.
Hey,
Thank
Terry has a good question
Terry has a question.
in the chat.
Oh,
Thoughts on using Ancestry?
Hi, I'm unmuting myself.
okay, thanks, Terry.
Yeah, I've been using a lot of Ancestry, and then that takes you down other rabbit holes of other genealogical sites. And then you start to question reliability because things differ. So what do you do to kind of tease that stuff out? Do you use that stuff like
Yes,
as
absolutely.
fact?
So yeah, that's a very, very good question. Generally, the genealogical proof standard says that if you can find 3 factual items that say the same thing, then you know that that's a true thing, or you can be more assured that is a true thing. Daughters of the American Revolution may accept that if there are 3, yes. you have to understand, people are human. People did not know how to read back then. People, even who took the census, they don't know how to type names correctly. They may have made mistakes in the occupations they made. So that's why it's really important to get multiple documents that will answer your question with any research question, if you can. And so, yes, with Ancestry, those are human beings. If you look at Ancestry family trees, they are not all correct. Mine is not correct. Mine is a theoretical tree. I tell people at the very beginning, watch out, don't copy my stuff. I am testing theories of parentage. Okay, and I use Ancestry, especially the DNA. Hello, DNA is critically important. And I use that to help me find answers and direct me to the right people who might have documents that they will share with me. So
Thank you. Yes.
always ask questions, even though you see it in one place. Yes.
Most people who don't know it have a terrible history of being a racist organization. When Marian,
Anderson.
I think Anderson wanted to sing, they barred her from DAR Constitution Hall. So I want to know, how the hell do you think you're going to get them to accept your work as well documented as it's going to be?
Yeah.
I mean,
So
I think it's admirable what you're doing, but I don't know whether the reputation has changed much, has it?
it has.
Oh.
Well, it has, and overtly so. The first African American woman who was accepted into DAR was 1978, I believe, and then it was a 10-year. So now there are over 150 Black women who have been accepted in the DAR, and they're very actively trying to cover that up. Now, the neat thing about that.
Just trying to cover up the fact that they have over 100 Black women.
No, they're trying to get rid of that reputation of being racist. And so they're jumping all over the place in helping. And so I want them to help. Fine, great, yes. And so the neat thing is the book I'm working on right now takes place in Mount Vernon, Ohio. And they did have Marian Anderson come and sing there in their opera house. And my family was involved in that. She would stay in the homes of people like my family. So, yes.
When you say you're working to get the research that you've accomplished to satisfy their standards, does that mean you're trying to meet the current standards or get them to change or modify their standards?
They haven't modified their standards, except that since there were no African Americans were considered property, and so they do not have names on birth certificates. There were none, that just. However, if you make a compelling proof argument statement, and again, this is really getting into the genealogical proof standard of what can and can't be. We just have to have a lot of circumstantial evidence, and we have to write a proof statement that suggests to anybody who read the same documents that we read that likely this is the lineage, the true lineage of the, and it takes a long time for most Black Americans. It'll take 2 years to get in. Not all, some got in right away because someone had already documented, like anyone in the Sons of the American Revolution, same thing. If you're in and one of your ancestors is already been accepted, you just have to make the link between that and you. It's already there. It doesn't have to take a long time. But if it's a first timer and it's someone, it takes longer, but it happens now because it's so well known what the past was. You speak up when you need to speak up, but I don't mind answering questions, but it depends on you all. Yeah, so I don't know what the arrangements are.
Kathy,
Yes, Chris.
the woman from the picture that was 106, 107 years old, that was a relative of yours. Did you meet her and actually interview her? Did you interview her?
Yes, many times I interviewed her.
And when did she pass away?
She passed in 2014.
That's such a fascinating story, man. I love that.
She worked for a Pulitzer Prize winning author. She was the main cook, the only cook. And there's a cookbook that's dedicated to her. She was a regular woman who lived an extraordinary life. And that's the point of what I want to do. Everyone in here, no matter who you are, no matter where you came from, You have stories to tell about your family. They're not all good, they're not all bad. That's the point. And I think it's fascinating when you find some of these things in these really obscure, a congressional record. A Black person is listed in the congressional record with the whole testimony and everything. Who would ever think that? And so, because we never have had the opportunity to think that, because our stories have never been told, or rarely. So, yeah.
Was a big writer in New York City in the 1920s. She wrote short stories for the magazines. I think we have 1 or 2 articles, but now I'm going to research.
I bet you can find them. Look in those newspapers in the local area where he lived and put his name in quotes, his name, different spellings of the name. Remember, people didn't always know how to spell or spell correctly, or there's typos. So put all permutations of the name, whatever that name is. No, they didn't. They didn't. Yeah. So did you have something, Rose? Did you want to say something?
On LinkedIn.
Oh, okay.
Okay, you should do what I just did. While somebody else was questioning, I went to my LinkedIn and I gave Kathy a really good little testimonial information about her talk today. And it's a good way of not only helping her, but networking a little bit and stuff. So do that if you get up.
That's cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Here you go.
Okay. Anything else? Oh, and by the way, not only were names misspelled, but old newspapers misspelled a lot. They misspelled names, they misspelled, they capitalized things that, of course, we don't, and so on. Yeah. Well, so you have to kind of take that, as a little pinch of salt and find other ways to